Welcome to CWS Christian Writing and Speaking. I'm your host, Jackie Wilson, and today's guest says he has enjoyed officiating weddings for his family and friends for over 10 years, and he has plenty of favorite stories to share. He is an ordained minister who found an unlikely path to his calling, and he says along the way, he has learned valuable life lessons that help enrich our faith and prepare us for all that God has in store for us in the journeys ahead. And today we will focus on what it is that you need to know as you start thinking about your wedding day and preparing. What questions may you have? So let's get into it, CWS audience, and welcome to the CWS stage, Mr. Aaron Smith. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you. It's such a blessing and honor to be with you today. And I'm just so looking forward to this conversation and seeing what God will do, in our conversation. And just hello to everyone who is joining us. And I'm just so delighted to be a part of this conversation today. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important to talk about these topics because when we think about the wedding, the marriage, we only want to think about all these good things, but we never slow down to think about, oh, should I ask this person about this? Or should I think about this? Or how are we going to do this? And that's what I'm looking forward to with this conversation, just being open and honest about what it is that we're missing and that we need to look for. But before we get into that part, how did you find yourself being an ordained minister who is performing all of these weddings?
Thank you for the question. So I said it was an unlikely calling because growing up, I never dreamed that I would be a preacher, an ordained minister, anything like that. I thank God for my parents. I did grow up in Christian home and they had wonderful influence, but all the way through college and grad school and all that, still did not think that ministry was for me. And so it took God really impressing upon me through friends, through family, through the experiences that I had, and just making it clear, first that was my direction, my path. Even though I was hesitant, even though I didn't think I was qualified enough, as they say, God qualifies the call, doesn't call the qualified. And that was me. I did not have any reason to think I was so smart or so gifted or talented to be in ministry. But along the way, God has shown fruit and really blessed wonderful friendships, wonderful marriages that have come from it. And it really has been, we're going to get to this, but it's been my friends and family, who I officiated weddings for. I'm not the senior pastor of a church, although I serve at a church. I'm not the senior pastor who usually gets the nod when it comes to weddings officiated at that church. So it's been people that I know, word of mouth, and that's been the way that I've found my way to be able to have the greatest honor to be able to shepherd people through their wedding. And I'm sure we'll talk about that process a little more as well, how that works.
Yeah, that's amazing to be such a significant part of the beginning of new life for many people. And yeah, I want to know, how is it that you prepare them for the wedding? Because you don't just say, okay, I'll officiate for you. You actually want them to sit down and have some conversations.
Thank you. That's such an important question because I do have some guidelines that I go by. I really want the couple to have at least a few sessions with me, at least 3 sessions or 3 meetings that we go through. And I'll get to some of the reasons for that. But we want to get to know each other and we want to get to know who we really are. I want the couple to know who I am. Most importantly, of course, I want them to know who they are. And I want them to know who one another are. If I'm saying that correctly, because oftentimes we have expectations for ourselves, expectations that are placed on us from others, but we want to sort through all that. And we want to know, do you really know who you are marrying? And do you really know who you are? So who you're bringing into this relationship and who you're bringing into marriage. One of the things I tell them right away is marriage is not the same as dating. It doesn't matter how long you've dated. There's something holy, there's something divine about when you are married in the sacrament of marriage to someone that is completely different. And it really is, although you've been with that person in a relationship. It really is a new day once you get married. So that's what we prepare for. We want them to really be resolved and joyful about who they're marrying. We all have, and I'll be the first one to say, we all have shortcomings. We all have faults and things of those nature, but we still want them to be in a joyful, blessed experience in their marriage. And that's what we prepare for. That's what we have in mind when we are setting out on the course. And through those, when I go through at least 3 sessions or meetings, and it doesn't have to be so rigid. We go to lunch, we'll maybe go do something else fun or whatever they're, double date, whatever they're comfortable with. But we want them to be able to establish some spiritual practices. If we're talking about Christian marriage preparation, thinking about devotional life, thinking about prayer life, thinking about what it means to be connected to a worship, to be connected to a church, to have a pastor, those things that we know, not having a task list, not such thing, but things that we know are proven. Things that we know are going to help the marriage and not hurt the marriage or the relationship. Those are just a few things that we'd love to just cover, and it's more about supporting the couple in that. Do you have a pastor? Could I help you find one? Is there something that I can share with you that is going to encourage you in that process, finding a community that is supporting and loving you as a couple, those sorts of things. We just want people to feel loved, supported, and seen.
No, it's great. My next question is, what are some of the questions that you ask, and what are some of the questions that they're surprised about that you do ask?
So one of the things is we get into identity for sure. We want to know how your identity has been formed. Where did it come from? Where did you grow up? What city was it? And some of these things are not always aware, they're not at the front of our mind. They're in our subconscious. They're things that we don't even remember. Growing up, we used to go to this concert or this, we used to have this experience. And that somehow started to form our identity, or we allowed it to. So even though we are, we're talking to believers, even though we're born again, things sometimes shape us and form us that we are not always completely aware of, and we are practicing and living those things out. So we want to talk about identity. How did you get here? What influenced you to choose your spouse to be? And, just even though those things may be, people think they know the reason, or they think they've had that conversation. A lot of times they haven't, so it's like, let's say this out loud, because when we intentionally love our spouse, we have a record of it. We have, and record's probably not the best word, but we have a witness of that love, so we can always think back. Yes, you did tell me why you wanted to marry me. Not just assume, not just propose. You told me why. And I'm okay with the reason that you gave me, that you wanted. So that's one of the questions that sometimes surprises, because again, we sometimes assume or think that we've had a conversation that we haven't. So sometimes just bringing that to the forefront. Tell me why you wanted to marry me again, and it's not to be, put the pressure on or make somebody, sweat, that sort of thing. But it really helps us to know what course we're going on. What direction are we going in? And do we have a strong foundation? Have we at least established that we are here for the same reason, for the right reason, and in that way that God is a part of this? Not we're telling God, it's God is in the relationship, in the home, in the relationship, and in the marriage.
What are some of the daily habits married couples should have?
Daily couples should think about encouraging them as soon as they can. There's not too much you can do as a spouse. Encourage them, pray with them. I thank God for my wife. Let me just say right now, she is the one in the morning who always, no matter what, encourages us to pray together. Even if she's a teacher, so even if she gets up a little bit before I do, I get up and take our son to daycare, that sort of thing. But she's the one who says, we need to pray before we, do anything else before we leave the house. I am more on the devotional, I am more, I think, especially being in ministry, I want to make sure that I have a devotional time. And even if I encourage her with it, share that with her, making sure that's the case. But in addition to those things, we need to make sure we're asking for forgiveness daily, first, before we assume that forgiveness needs to be given. Say, I'm so sorry. Let me just reflect. So to answer your question, reflection is so important. Let's reflect on this day. What's something that is bothering you, that's been bothering you? What's something is there anything that I can do to help? Because even though sometimes you can't, even though they may have a headache, besides getting them, something for that headache, you may not be able to take that headache away, but at least letting them know, I'm there, I'm here with you. I will do anything that I can to support you. To answer your question again, reflection, serving your spouse, just like Jesus demonstrated, we are to serve one another. That certainly is so important in a marriage. In any way possible, just making sure that we look back over and say, hey, let's catch this in this day. Let's not let this go into the next day, making sure that we're resolved, that as much as possible. Because when we reflect, one thing that happens is we start to see patterns. I saw one pastor talking about this recently. We see patterns and we are able to pray and ask God to resolve that pattern, and say, look, I see this is happening every other week or every other day. What can we do together? How can we pray on this and help our home to be a healthy home and marriage? And one last thing I'll say is we ought not to be apologetic about having a healthy, spirit-filled home. There are so many challenges, so many detractors, so many schemes that are out there that we should not be afraid to say, I want this home to be blessed and kept and supported by God's will, just because that's what God intends for us, and that's what is our inheritance in Him.
Yeah, I love it. What are some of the red flags couples should look for, and maybe they shouldn't walk down the aisle?
This has been a so popular conversation recently, right? The red flags, so many trends, so many memes. I say we shouldn't wait till it's a red flag. What about the pink flags? What about the beige flags? What about, wait, let's start looking at the flags before they become red. That's the first thing I would say. Red is way too late. If you have a red flag, and especially if you didn't see it or didn't, intentionally seek it out before marriage, you may have a red flag. That's the unfortunate. So let's work on it first. Let's detect it much, much earlier. Don't even let it get yellow beforehand. But some of those things are, listening is huge. Listening is one of the most important things that I would say is important, because listening, and I admit this, even in my own marriage and even in my own life, that's one of the things that my wife shares with me, and I don't want to be share with a stereotype, but men, this is something that we often get, is something that we need to work on. Listening is so important because it shows the humility that I will work on this. I heard someone else's opinion, someone else's viewpoint. So if there's not the willingness to listen, just even listen first, to acknowledge that something else has been said other than my opinion, other than my viewpoint, that is something that would be a red flag. And the next step in that is working on things together. If everything is done apart, if everything is separate, everything is just not a joint effort, then that is a concern, because you want things to be, it is a team. It is most certainly a team that you are on, that you can take all the breaks you need, but you're still on the team. All the challenges you have, you're still on the team. So anything that is looked upon as doing it together, whether it's whatever show you watch, whatever, meal that you like to enjoy together, as much things as you do separately, it's so important to keep those things that you do together very present and centered in the life and in the marriage. One more I'll just share is how we relate to one another's families and one another's friends. It's been often said, when you get married, you don't just marry the person. You do just marry the person, but you certainly are joined with a whole community, whether it be their church family, whether it's their school, their classroom, whether it's their job, whether it's their nieces and nephews. You are joining more than just the person. And so making sure that there's respect, that there's good communication, paying attention, that there is a healthy relationship as much as possible with the spouse's family, with their community, with their people that they brought with them. Just that's so important, so important. And just if you're looking for something in a significant other, in a spouse, that's one of the major things I would highlight, because the ability to love the people that are not, you didn't choose necessarily, you chose your spouse, but you didn't choose the family. The ability to love them with the same respect and honor and all of those things is a huge, huge just signal in the right direction.
Yeah, I love it. And one more question is, if somebody is interested in marriage and they're starting the dating process, what are some advice that you would give them so that they can have a healthy dating life and to lead to a healthy marriage?
That's a great question. And the one thing I would share to begin is make sure that you are okay with you first. Being able to see with healthy eyes and a healthy heart, making sure that you're resolved about any relationships in the past, all of that should be resolved. We're not perfect. We are only by the grace of God, we are able to live in his perfect will. But just making sure if you are really in a healthy, resolved place, mentally, emotionally, with yourself, about, again, with your any relationships that were in the past, you will be able to see so much more clearly who is right for you. And even when God sends someone, sometimes God sends someone and we don't see it, or we just don't see it at first. We don't recognize it. But if we are in a good place ourselves, then we are so much more, susceptible to just more open to the right person to be able to say, oh yeah, that's, of course, thank you, God. You sent the right, here they are. If we are, and let me just explain what I mean about being in a good place. It doesn't mean that every single thing has to be perfect in our lives. That's not realistic. That's not real life. But if we know I'm making all of the best financial choices I can. Spiritual decisions I can. Emotionally, I really am doing the best to take care of myself and my present state with all the challenges and all of the things that are coming my way. When we are okay with us, we are in such, we don't even have to look. That's even what the Bible tells us, we don't even really need to look, but God will send and make it so clear the right time and what's in his will for us when the time is right. So if we are so enjoying, taking care of what God has stewarded us in our lives, then that prepares us for the next step.
I love it. Tell people what's next for you, Aaron.
What's next for me? I am open and discerning. I really do enjoy being able to serve. I on the role at my church to give morning prayers, devotionals, and to lead worship, from time to time with a wonderful staff of ministers that serve there. But this is another aspect of how I enjoy serving. I enjoy having conversations, finding out what are the stressors. That's really why I started my whole project, my whole website and my app and all those things. It was in my own wedding planning. Even after having officiated 9 weddings for my friends and family, I realized if you're in that position, if you are preparing yourself for marriage, there are very particular stresses that can arise that can be very challenging. And if you are prepared, then you are so much better equipped to be able to go through that process. So navigating things that we talked about, navigating families, navigating very specifically what my website and app does is takes care of the wedding party and participate in a wedding, and everyone is just all over the place and can't figure out what the bridesmaids are doing, this day, and what's supposed to wear, and what the groomsmen are doing, and ushers, and all of these different things. That's really what it does, is it takes care of, helps everybody be on the same page, to know where you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to be doing. So that's what my website is, wedistry.com, and the app is of the same name on the App Store, Wedistry for wedding parties. And so that's what it does. It really just helps us to get on the same page, those who have assignments during the wedding process, and to help them. But there's nothing more I enjoy than helping couples walk through that process. So I do want to continue to do that. Certainly I enjoy continue to preach as well. But really, Jackie, whatever God has for me is what is next. And as far as just walking along that journey with couples is something I immensely enjoy doing. So.
And it definitely sounds like you do. You've already given your website address as well as the app address. Do you have any social media?
Yes, we are also on Instagram at Wedistry USA, and the same handle on Twitter, Wedistry USA as well. We're going to work on getting the Wedistry title as well for all of those, but it's WEDISTRY.com, and the same for those as well. And if any couples are interested in walking through that process, the email address is just info@wedistry.com, and I would be more than happy to have that conversation. And one of the things I say is, whether it's me or another officiant, I'm so happy just to be involved in even the discerning process, and just to encourage people to be having a joyful experience as they are on the way to be married and prepared to be married.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so wonderful to have people like you who are guiding people along the way, because we need this. We want healthy marriages, because healthy marriages create healthy families and healthy communities and healthy churches. So the effect is just long term. And so my prayer is that as people are listening to this, and if they're considering getting married, or even know someone who is getting married, that they will take the time to listen to this episode and receive some of this wisdom that you have poured out on us today. Now, Aaron, as we wrap up your interview, what is the one thing you feel like people should implement into their life as they're thinking about marriage?
So I would say having a healthy routine for enjoying themselves, for relaxation. People told me when I was getting married, make sure you keep that date night, make sure you keep that vacation schedule, have fun. And I would say that's so simple. Why is that so important? But now I understand how important that is, especially going through COVID, going through the pandemic, through all the things that we've been through in the last few years. We were blessed we have an almost 2-year-old son. And through all of those things, we certainly understand now it's so important that you enjoy time intentionally and carve out time with one another. That is the whole purpose of your time, your marriage and your time together, is to enjoy one another's company. And through all of the routine and work and even some of the assignments that we have, that sometimes can get put on the back burner, and sometimes can be easily kind of just ignored. But I would say book that vacation. As soon as you can, make sure you find fun things to do in your city. If you have children, get that babysitter, get that time. Don't be afraid to ask someone for time for yourselves, because I would end with this, it really does need to be protected. If you don't protect that time, if you don't carve it out and say, I'm not doing anything else, this day except spending time with my lovely husband, my lovely wife, then that time will get changed. Something else will come along and take that away. So that's the one thing I would say. It's as simple as it sounds. I get it now. Have fun, make sure it's on the schedule, and also, impromptu, just get up and, go and do something on the whim. That's also important too, because we can get so keyed into our routine that we forget that we just need to enjoy what's around us. We need to make sure and be willing to see what God will put something in our path, that we just didn't plan on. That's the whole point, to just make sure we're paying attention to that. So
I love it. I mean, such a wealth of wisdom again. And these habits that you're forming during the dating process leading up into the wedding, and then even after you're married, making sure you keep that date night, making sure you're listening to one another, taking the time to ask for forgiveness and forgiving one another before the sun sets. I mean,
yes,
all of this is so important, and it needs to be practiced the whole way through. You don't start in the marriage. That's what I'm hearing. You don't start in the
that's
marriage.
it.
You start before the marriage, so the habit is already formed and you can move forward. And my favorite thing that I've heard today is make sure you're okay with you. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, making sure that they're okay, making sure they know what they need. I know in my process of dating, God asked me, he said, what do you need? And you have to have this honest answer. I mean, he already knows, but you need to be honest with yourself so that you can really receive what God has for you and that you're not missing it when he's sending it your way. So CWS audience, you have heard it. Make sure you have listened and take and implement this wisdom into your life. It's not too late to start. Even if you've been in that marriage for 5-10 years, start now so that you can create a healthier marriage, a healthier family, a healthier community, and a healthier church. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And until next time, beautiful people, God bless.